Welcome to Eco 102, Study Session 7, Income Determination in the Long Run. Introduction. You will recall that all our analysis up to this point centers on how cyclical fluctuation can be taken care of. As noted, cyclical fluctuations, the ups and downs of the economy in a short-run phenomenon, is a short-run phenomenon. We will explore income determination in the long run in this study session. When you have studied this session, you should be able to discuss the concept of productivity, discuss the determinants of labor productivity, production and growth. Productivity is defined as the amount of goods and services that can be produced per person. This is also called GDP per person. GDP per person or productivity can be perceived as a product of two terms: average labor productivity and the share of the population that is working. To fix ideas about what productivity is, let Q represent aggregate output measured by real GDP. Let L represent the number of employed workers, and let N represent the total population. Real GDP per person by definition can be written as Q over N. Average labor productivity or output per person employed equals Q over L, while the share of working population from total population is L over N. The relationship between these three variables is Q over N equals Q over L times L over N. That is the basic relationship, in that real GDP per person equals average labor productivity multiplied by share of population employed. If we think of output produced per person being equal to output consumed per person, then the above expression implies that the quantity of goods and services that each person can consume depends on A, how much each worker can produce, and B, the number of people working. The higher each worker can produce, the greater is GDP per person, and the more abundant goods and services are available for consumption. Also, the more we have people working in the economy, the more there will be goods and services available for consumption. That is, real GDP per person can grow only to the extent that there is growth in workers' productivity and or the fraction of the population that is employed. It turns out that the long-run increase in output per person arises primarily from increases in aggregate labor productivity. Therefore, it is important to examine the determinants of average labor productivity. Determinants of labor productivity. Some traditional economists argue that workers' productivity depends on the willingness of workers to work hard. According to this line of thought, a culture that promotes hard work certainly tends to increase workers' productivity. However, empirical evidence shows that hard work alone cannot account for large variation in average labor productivity that is observed across countries over time. For example, average labor productivity in the United States is 100 times what it is in Bangladesh, even though Bangladesh work harder than Americans. Also, average labor productivity in Nigeria today is more than 100 times what it was 50 years ago, even though workers then worked harder than workers of nowadays. Modern economists have probed into this issue and came out with six possible factors that determine labor productivity. The factors are human capital, physical capital, land and other natural resources, technology, entrepreneurship and management, and political and legal environment. Human capital. Human capital comprises of talents, education, training, and skills. Workers with large stock of human capital appear to be more productive than workers with less. Human capital helps to develop one's skill level, which can be used to produce more than when such skill is lacking. For example, a secretary who knows how to use a word processing program will be able to type more documents than one who does not. Also, an auto mechanic equipped with skill of computerized diagnostic equipment will be able to detect engine fault and be able to fix the problem more quickly than less well-trained mechanics. It must be noted that human capital acquisition is not without cost. For instance, one needs to create time, energy, and money for the acquisition of such skill. All these are opportunity costs to be considered. However, the benefit of such acquisition is the increase in wages that will be earned after the acquisition of such skill. It turns out that what motivates workers to work and to want to acquire extra skill is the difference between wages of the skilled and unskilled workers. If the difference is positive, workers tend to acquire more skill, and this invariably increases their productivity and hence output. Physical capital. Workers' productivity also depends on the available equipment, machine, and tool. The most skilled building engineer cannot build a 50-story glass building without sophisticated building and engineering equipment. A most talented musician will not be able to develop his potentials with limited musical instruments. These examples illustrate the importance of physical capital such as factories and machines in the production of goods and services. In a nutshell, more and better capital allows workers to produce more efficiently and effectively. However, continuous increase in physical capital may not lead to continuous increase in output. When labor and other input are held constant, the greater the amount of capital already in use, the less an additional unit of capital adds to production. That is, physical capital is subject to diminishing returns to capital tells us how to stimulate economic growth. First, increasing the amount of capital available to the workforce will tend to increase output and average labor productivity. The more adequately equipped workers are, the more productive they will be. Second, the degree to which productivity can be increased by an expanding stock of capital is limited. Because of diminishing return to capital, an economy in which the quantity of capital available to each worker is already very high will not benefit much from such further expansion of the capital stock. Land and other natural resources. Other factor inputs necessary for increasing workers' productivity are land, energy, and raw materials. In general, an abundance of natural resources increase the productivity of workers who use them. For instance, fertile land is essential to agriculture. A farmer can produce as much large crop in a land rich country like the United States and Nigeria than in a country where the soil is poor or arable land is limited in supply, as in Iraq. That a country lacks some natural resources does not mean that it cannot increase its production. As long as natural resources like crude oil, petroleum, metals, and chemicals can be obtained through trade, countries with limited natural resources can raise production by obtaining necessary natural resource inputs through international trade. Technology. Ability to develop and use new technologies will go a long way to increase output per person. Technology is defined as a scientific means of producing large amount of goods and services within a short period of time or per unit of labor. In the modern days, the horse-driven wagon was the primary means of transportation. This method, no doubt, is not only costly but also very slow. In the 19th century, technological advances such as steam engine supported the expansion of riverborne transport and the development of national rail network. Nowadays, the invention and development of international network of an extensive infrastructure of roads and airports have produced increasingly rapid, cheap, and reliable transport. Rapid technological transition has also occurred in construction, financial institutions, and telecommunication. Technological change has also contributed immensely to the sectoral revolution of the economy, entrepreneurship, and management. The productivity of workers depend in part on the people who help to decide what to produce and how to produce it. Entrepreneur is defined as people who create new economic activities. Entrepreneurs tend to be creative and always introduce new products, new services, new technological processes, and new production techniques. To this extent, entrepreneurs are critical to dynamic, mature, and improved economy. In fact, the more people are enterprising, the healthier the economy becomes. Not only that, since entrepreneurs create new enterprises, it means the more they present these to the nation, the greater the new things that are discovered, made use of, and the more output grows. The political and legal environment. All the factors mentioned above describe the roles played by the private sector in increasing average productivity of labor. If an economy operates a mixed economic system, it follows that government also has a role to play in improving productivity. One important contribution of government to productivity is to provide political and legal environment that encourages people to behave in economically productive ways whereby they are taught to work hard, save, and invest wisely, acquire useful information and skills, and provide goods and services that the public demands. Another important contribution of government to productivity and growth is in the area of providing well-defined property rights. By property rights, we're referring to the provision of clear rules for determining who owns what resources and how those resources can be used. Government should also ensure political stability. It has been unanimously agreed upon that political instability is inimical to economic growth. This is true because investors and savers may not be willing to invest or save in a country fraught with financial uncertainty brought about by unstable government policy or unstable terrain, particularly if the struggle for power involves civil unrest, terrorism, and the likes. On the other hand, a political system that supports and operates free and open exchange of ideas will create incentive for investment to thrive, will speed the development of new technologies, and will ascertain protection of lives and property. With these in place, production will take place dramatically, output will increase steadily, and economic growth will be achieved. Public policy and economic growth. The primary objective of an economy is to be able to increase production in a continuous manner such that goods and services can be available for consumption and possibly for export. There are many policy measures that government can apply in order to make this fundamental objective realizable. Based on the discussion of the factors that necessitate growth in labor productivity, the policy measures that can be taken include policies to increase human capital, policies to promote physical capital, and policies to improve legal and political framework. Public policy and human capital. We have demonstrated the importance of human capital development in economic growth. Governments of most countries try to increase human capital of their citizens by supporting education and training programs. In Nigeria, government provide public education by making schooling free for students up to JSS 3. Also, government encourage people to attain tertiary education by subsidizing the financial outlay of tertiary education. Government also provides scholarship to outstanding students through educational trust fund in furtherance of their education. In some advanced countries like the United States, government funds job training for skilled youth and retraining for workers whose skills have become obsolete. In Nigeria, the National Industrial Training (NIT) was set up by the government to provide basic skills for some intending Nigerians. This is in a view to making them highly skillful so that their productivity can increase. Public policy and physical capital accumulation. Average labor productivity increases when workers can utilize a sizable and modern capital stock. To support the creation of new capital, government can encourage high rate of savings and create conducive environment for investment in the private sector. In the United States, one of the policy measures to encourage saving is the U.S. tax code. In this case, a household that opens an individual retirement account (IRA) is able to save for retirement without paying tax on either the funds deposited in the IRA or the interest earned on the account. The intent of the IRA legislation is to make savings more financially attractive to Americans households. A similar scheme like that of the US also exists in Nigeria, that is called the pension scheme legislation. This government policy requires all Nigerian workers to save part of their monthly earnings in their pension account. The essence of this is to inculcate the habit of savings and also to divert money to its most efficient use, which is investment. Government can also contribute to capital formation through public investment. Public investment include the building of roads, rural areas, urban electrification, and creation of bridges, dams, irrigation, energy, and communication networks. In the area of transportation, construction, and or rehabilitation of motor roads, rail, roads, seaports, and airports, and airways are some ways through which public policy affect physical accumulation. That Nigeria has developed to the use of computer and communication for business transaction is not new. It must be noted that the involvement of Nigeria in e-business is not uncommon with government funding. In fact, many research studies have confirmed that government investment in the provision of infrastructure, the capital that supports private sector economic activity, is a significant source of growth. Public policy and legal and political framework. Government provides framework within which the private sector operates productively. In our earlier discussion, we mentioned the fact that the establishment of property rights, a well-functioning legal system, and political stability are crucial to labor productivity and hence growth. Hence, government policymakers should, as a matter of importance, also consider the potential effect of tax and regulation policy on activities that increase productivity, such as investment, innovation, and risk taking. Public policy and technological improvement. As demonstrated earlier, average labor productivity rises with technological improvement. Technology is being produced through research and development. Individual firms whose intention is to maximize profit will set up its private research and development section. For instance, Cadbury Nigerian PLC has a research and development department that helps with the development of new technique of producing old products and the invention of new products. However, government policy can also be useful in national development. This is so because society in general, rather than individual, may receive much of the benefit from basic research. Nigerian government has a policy that supports basic research and development. There are many research institutes that are established and financed by the government of Nigeria. Among them are National Institute of Economic and Social Research, NISA, National Institute of Horticulture, NIHOT, and so on. All these are aimed at providing general discoveries that will help private firms thrive. Summary. In this study session, you learn that the economy's full capacity is achieved in the long run. Specifically, long run is a period sufficient to allow time for the automatic adjustment mechanism to return economic activity to equilibrium after it has been disturbed by an exogenous shock. We began by examining the causes and consequences of economic growth. A key conclusion from the analysis is that improvement in average labor productivity are the primary source of rising standard of living. Lastly, we examine the consequences of public policy on economic growth. This is the end of study session 7. Thanks for listening.